Well, hello. Welcome to Men's Couch podcast about having safe conversations with other men and mental health and just talking about masculinity. Welcome, Tom.
Good to be here, Micah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So are you like the host of your organization of your other brothers, or did you like create it?
I have a lot of hats that I wear, let me tell you. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm the co-founder of Your Other Brothers. We started as a blog back in 2015. It was a place for men who identify as gay or same-sex attracted, people who have a historic understanding and belief about sexuality and marriage, yet find themselves mostly, if not exclusively, attracted to the same sex and what to do about that. And so we started out just as a blog. We added a podcast the next year and started building some momentum and followers on Patreon. And then it's only been in the last couple of years when some women stepped forward, especially one woman in particular, who reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we enjoy your content too. And we would love to have the same thing y'all are doing, but for women and for us to be
Right.
combined essentially." And so now over a couple of years now, it's been a long process, but we officially shifted from a for-profit organization to a nonprofit organization. So we are now a nonprofit ministry. I still lead the men's community. So I'm the director of Your Other Brothers. We have a director
Mhm.
of the women's community, Your Other Sisters, and then I also executive direct the entire nonprofit, which is called Your Other Family. So I wear a lot of different hats now between like I still write blogs, I still edit blogs, I still do podcasts, and that's all fun. We have a men's community where we do Zoom calls and retreats. And then I also am like the nuts and bolts guy who like talks about budgets and plans board meetings and all that exciting stuff too with the nonprofit ministry. So yeah, do a little bit of everything these days, but it's good work with great people. I'm thoroughly supported, and it's been a fun part of my life for a decade now.
Yeah, this sounds so awesome. I got connected with it through Brian. I don't really remember how I don't know how I reached out to him, but it was probably like through one of the blogs that I found like very interesting about men's friendship and how men can confront like cultural norms that we've been taught to internalize. So I felt that that was interesting, but I also felt like so I don't wrestle with sexuality or same-sex attraction, but the themes and the topics that you talk about, like I deeply resonate with. Whether it's like finding like your community or your tribe, or just talking about like masculinity and vulnerability. I felt that that was like something that I see like maybe like church communities don't necessarily talk about too much.
Yeah, no, and that encourages me because I think it's always been my hope from the beginning that our content wouldn't just be for gay or SSA men. Like my hope was that like, oh, that a straight man could read this, who maybe not all straight men, maybe it is a select portion of straight men, but it's always been in my heart that this could just be for men in general because like all men need friends and all men need belonging and a place to be real and be vulnerable and the things that we champion in our community that maybe by and large generally comes easier to a community of non-straight men, but I love that it can be for all men, and that's my hope for the future is that anyone who reads any of our blogs or listens to our podcasts can see something of themselves in it if you're a man, and especially if you follow Jesus and you just want to live in authenticity with him and with other people around you. Like I hope that's for you too.
Yeah, it's just so awesome. From what I've read on your content, it's just been so awesome. Recently, I've been just looking at your YouTube shorts. Those have been very eye opening about what it's like to be a believer that wrestles with same-sex attraction, and I think it really helped to open my eyes and understand it. I think one of like my first comments was you said something about I think is asexuality and talk confronting that in with your therapist, but your therapist I forgot what your therapist said.
Well, my therapist was basically like, "You're not asexual." I was talking
Yeah.
about it's really confusing, and people listening may not understand either, and that's okay because I haven't understood my own life for most of my life, but, like, I've been attracted to men my whole life. I've never been attracted to women, like, not even a little, but my
Mhm.
attractions with men, like, they're definitely emotional, they're definitely physical, like, 100% for sure, but I always struggle when it comes to the concept of sexual attraction because if you break it down into just, like, do I want to have sex with a man? The answer is no, I don't, and I don't wanna have sex with
Mhm.
a woman either, for that matter, But, like, if you just strip it down all the way down to that bare bones definition, which I think asexuality includes much more than do I wanna have sex or not, but if that's what you were gonna
Mhm.
pare it down to, that's what I was trying to share with my therapist, and it just wasn't, like, landing or wasn't connecting because I still
Uh,
experience arousal, I still get aroused, it's not like that doesn't happen,
right.
but yeah, it's just, like, it was really tricky to try to talk about it in a therapist's office, which is supposed to be a safe place, and I felt like I was on
Yeah.
blast basically. And, you know, I think it came from a good place by and large, but I think also I lost a lot of trust in him after that. And so it wasn't too long after that that I decided to part ways with this therapist because you're not, you know, I wasn't married to him. I'm not like committed to this person. I can cut him off. Like I think there can be this like preconception like if you break up with your therapist that it was a waste of time or that you failed, but,
Right.
like, I learned so much from him because for despite the negative experience I had with him in with regard to processing asexuality, like, I did learn a lot. He was very knowledgeable, about matters of sex in particular,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I spent a year with him. It was time to move on. I found another therapist, and I think I've, by and large, gained more from this next therapist than I did from him. Um, but I don't know. It was interesting to start to process that at least with somebody.
Right, and that's very important to me, like, that you share your experience because I want to be a therapist working with men, and
Mhm.
I wanna just be aware of some of, like, the maybe, like, the challenges that come with that. Whether it's not understanding someone's story, I wanna be empathetic to that and empathetic to what
Yeah.
their experience is and not define it for them. I think that might have been maybe what have, like, happened. It's like, "Oh, you don't have this," but you're n it's not really listening to the client, it's
Right.
just, like, defining it for them. It's not a similar thing happened to me when I was describing a close friendship. It was, like, a close male friendship, and my therapist, she said, "Well, it sounds like you're in a romantic relationship," and it's like, I guess because of the way I was describing my care to the person like, about the person,
Mhm.
and she said, "Well, it sounds like you're dating the person." It's like, no, it's just I'm expressing my care and, commitment to this person, but that's just not in a male friendship context. Even like with therapists, they are like kind of, I don't know what the word is. They don't know how to hold that in like a safe way.
Yeah. There's, like, not a context that a lot of people have for it. Like, how can 2 men be affectionate with one another physically, emotionally, whatever that looks like, you know? Can they extend care for another man, but it doesn't come across as romantic? Like, that's the tension I think that a lot of people have today, and it's, you know, one that I'm still trying to navigate too. It's like, yeah, how do I whether the other person is also gay like me or straight or anywhere in between, like, how do I extend care to that person? How do I receive love from that person in a way that isn't perceived as sexual or romantic, you know? And that's a constant refrain that it's like simultaneously encouraging because I get emails from people or messages online from people who live on the other side of the world, like in Europe somewhere or
Mhm.
Asia or something, and they do not have this problem. I'm sure there's probably pockets of people that still experience
Right.
this. But like by and large, they don't, they're like listening to my content or reading my content and they're like, it's almost like I'm speaking another language to them. Like, what? You can't hold your best friend's hand, or you can't, I don't know, the list goes on. There's so many specific examples of men who can experience closeness without it being sexual or romantic, but it's, I guess it's a challenge in the West, like, it's just a different culture, different context out here.
Right, and that's what I talked about with Brian is that, how, like, certain cultures, it's just, like, so normal to be openly affectionate, and it's just
Mm,
even, like, with my friends just approach it differently. I have a Hispanic friend that, he just sa like, openly says, like, "Oh, I love you," and that's very normal for him, and I also have, like, my roommate that's super affectionate. So, I think is just different. I think men might be afraid of expressing their different personalities and approaches to affection and expressing love and care because they're so afraid of being perceived in a certain way.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, fear is a powerful motivator to not be perceived in certain ways.
Yeah. So, uh, I don't know if I could, okay. How would you say, like, in a nutshell, is your journey of like developing your other brothers and just your journey of coming to terms with your sexuality?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, I'll do my best. I grew up in a Christian home, on the East Coast of the United States, and always just grew up with a faith background. So I've always had a faith identity. I've never known my life without one, even going back to like 5 years old or 4 years old, whatever my first memories are. Like I can't think of a time in my life where faith wasn't present. And what I always tell people is almost simultaneous to that. Like if it wasn't at the same time, it was at least very soon after. Like I've also had this conscious awareness that there's something about the other boys, like when I was younger, and other men now.
Mhm.
Like I've always had this draw to them. And it wasn't sexual or even necessarily physical at 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, but there was a strong emotional bent towards other boys that young, in addition to some level of physical attraction as well. And so,
Mhm.
simultaneous to a faith identity, I feel like this has also just been a parallel course with my life of feeling attracted to men and the context, the culture that I grew up in, Christian home, churches, Christian schools. Like I just did not have any safe place to even begin to consider processing it. Like it wasn't even a thought on my mind that I could process it because it just wasn't even available as an option, essentially. So for
Wait,
18 years, 19 years, I just didn't. Yeah.
gonna say something about that. So whenever that was when you were coming to terms with that, what, like, time period was that? Like, what?
So I was born in 1987, good old
Okay.
80s. And so this would have been like throughout the late 90s or mid to late
Okay.
90s. And then certainly I graduated high school in 2005. So that's the sort of been 90s, 2000s primarily.
So, like, I'm trying to understand, like, that cultural context of the probably was, like, a lot of more lack of language for what you're experiencing at the time.
Yeah, I mean, today the language has shifted so much. I mean, gay today doesn't mean what it meant 40 years ago, 30 years ago. There's so many more nuances and directions, especially within a faith context. So I didn't
Mhm.
have any of that at my disposal. So kind of it just was I was a product of the times, particularly within a Christian context. But like now, there are so many books and blogs and podcasts, my own included, that talk about side B theology, which is a theology that I adhere to, which seeks to balance, an authenticity about one's sexual identity, but then also an authenticity about one's faith identity as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, none of that was present when I was a teenager, but I had to
Yeah.
figure it out later in life.
Yeah. So you were talking about I didn't mean to cut you off. So you were, talking about when you were graduating high school and then, like, how did you, you wanna, like, continue from that time?
Yeah, I mean the short of it is like it was my sophomore year in college. That's kind of where things came to a head. Excuse me, where things came to a head where I just really got caught up. I finally This was the age of like getting like Wi-Fi was becoming a thing. I'm talking in such prehistoric times. Like Wi-Fi was a thing and I had my own laptop in my own bedroom, which I previously was not able to do as a child. Like growing up, there was the family computer and that's all there was. And the family computer was in the living room and it was dial up internet. And so
Dial
there was no pornography happening, at least as far as I know. There was no pornography happening on that family computer. So when I had my own laptop in college, I was still living at home at that time. That's when I first discovered pornography, and that's kind of where things really came to a head really quickly because I felt completely like overwhelmed with shame and guilt and just basically probably didn't think about it long enough, but I decided to tell my parents about my sexuality. And so
Mhm.
that began a process of like literally up until I was 19 at the time. So for 19 years, I just assumed I would never tell anybody that I was attracted to men and that I also followed Jesus. Like I just thought that those two things could not coexist. Like there's no
Yeah.
outlet for that. So telling my parents was a big moment to finally bring some people in. I told my siblings a couple years later, told some friends, throughout the years, one here, one there. And so all of that led to a couple years later, just searching the internet. I was struggling again. I had told my parents and told my family and like they supported me, but it's hard to like know how to support somebody if you don't have a context for it yourself. And so
Yeah, or language.
yeah, so, like, they loved
Yeah.
me, they didn't reject me, they heard me, they handled that correctly, but as far as walking with me, like, that's not something that they knew how to do, and I didn't know what I needed someone else to walk me through, but I knew I needed some help, and I needed some resources, and so that's when I went to the internet and I searched for my exact Google search was "Christians struggling with homosexuality." I typed those 4 words into a Google search when I was
Mhm.
21 years old, and that led me to a bunch of guys blogging anonymously about faith, sexuality, masculinity, and as soon as I like clicked onto that and I saw all these guys blogging, like I knew I had found something like vital. Water in the desert, it was just like this this thing that I've been searching for my whole life. I just didn't know I was searching for it because I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that you could be a Christian and also experience what I was experiencing. And so that became the genesis for like developing these friendships with all these guys all over the world, writing about their story. I befriended many of them. Some of them are still friends to this day. And a bunch of us co-founded Your Other Brothers. This would have been like 7 years later. So it was like a 7 year journey of like developing friendships because I started blogging anonymously back then.
Mhm.
And then yeah, 2015, a bunch of us co-founded this website, now Your Other Brothers, and now a nonprofit ministry with Your Other Family. So it's been quite the journey of going from feeling like I couldn't talk about it to now that's all I do. All I do now is I talk about it on
Yes. Yeah.
TikToks and YouTube shorts and blogs and podcasts and everywhere I can have the opportunity to be authentic with people.
But that's awesome because, for so long, you didn't have anyone to really speak into that and really kind
Right.
of guide you into what was really going on. And I think, like, what do you think are maybe like the common approaches for Christians wrestling with sexuality in the church?
Approaches for the church or for Christian like me.
Yeah, like Christians like you, like maybe like what they get from like
Yeah.
family members or pastors, or like if they reach
Well, in
out.
an ideal world, yeah, in an ideal world, you would have a church that doesn't treat your story any differently than any other person struggling or into the church with a checkered past like anyone else. Like if everyone is equally in need of Jesus and equally not as far gone, like theoretically being gay or bi or queer or SSA or whatever they are, like shouldn't be a disqualifier for that. So ideally,
Mhm.
a youth pastor, elders, whoever is in leadership, like ideally you would have somebody in your church to be able to confess to or share your story with and not be turned away and actually be welcomed deeper in because you are by being vulnerable, exemplifying courage unmatched. So that would be the
Mhm.
ideal. Ideally, you'd have other people in your church too that could support you and walk with you through that. Like I don't know, it's particularly tricky for men. Like I don't want to say necessarily that it's harder for men than for women, but I do think men have specific challenges as far as being able to even just in a peer-to-peer context, like to just tell your brother or to tell your friend that you're struggling with anything, let alone
Yeah.
pornography or hooking up or whatever sexual sin might be present in your life. Like I imagine that that's really difficult for a lot of men. And so my hope is that there are people in the church. And often what I find with Your Other Brothers, when people reach out, when they write in, when they send me emails, like I see the gamut. I see people who are like super involved in their church. And now what they need, they've got the support. They've got the face to face support in their local church. And that's great and all. But they also need like the specific individualized support for other people who also experience what they experience, not just like
Yeah.
a bunch of straight people who are great, awesome, love empathetic straight people, but what about other people like me who can like understand what I'm going through and like have somebody like more in the trenches with me versus somebody that's still loving me, but it's just a different kind of love when it's not the same lived experience. So I see people like that who write in, and then I also see people write in who join our community who don't have either. Like they need support in the trenches and they also need that face-to-face support which we can't offer right now as a mostly
Mhm.
virtual community, but I know that they need that too. So my hope for anyone that experiences the same theology and the same sexual identity that I do, that you could find that face to face, but that also the internet is such a beautiful, devastating place where you can find a lot of awful things, but you can find a lot of beautiful things too. And like that's the beauty about especially all this talk now of AI and algorithms. Like
Bye.
for better or worse, it helps you find people quicker than you've ever been able to find your people. Like it's amazing how
Right.
many people can through a hashtag or through just the for you page or through scrolling, like all of a sudden you start to find content that seems really eerily exactly like your story, or there's some element of your story that's coming up a lot. And so that's an encouraging, it's not completely encouraging, but it's an encouraging component of all this new talk of AI and algorithms of just being able to find communities like ours more than ever.
Yeah. And questions come in mind is why do believers think that they can't integrate their sexual identity with their faith journey? And like a thing that's coming to my mind is that they think that sexuality is just like this qualifier that you can't talk about, but also it disqualifies you from community. And you can't be open and honest about it. And it's just I feel like it's just that thing and like, everything else, whether it be, like, addiction or marriage struggles or whatever, is seen as just, "Okay, this is a normal struggle," but this area of sexuality is just so highly compartmentalized and, like, kind of, like, people are generally afraid of saying anything.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me, we've done a podcast about it, but for whatever reason, it's not exclusive to gay people. Like for whatever reason, like the concept of even just talking about sex, like sexuality and talking about sex,
Yeah.
like growing up, like never got the sex talk. Still wait. I always joke, I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting
So, like
for the sex talk. When will I learn what sex is? Because I have never been taught that. So, and that's such a common story both within our Your Other Brothers community, but even other men. I'm a part of other men's groups where I live here in Asheville. Like that is such a common story amongst other millennials, people my age. Like for whatever reason, their boomer parents. Maybe this. I don't want to like blast the boomer generation or something, but for whatever reason, it was difficult for so many boomer parents to tell their millennial children about sex. And I don't know why that's such a common story that I've personally been a part of, but then I've also seen happen enough times. And it's just like there's so many dominoes that fall from that. Like if you don't tell your kids about sex or what sexuality is or what masturbation is or what arousal is or what it's just like the list goes on. And then you add on to it, like if I'm only attracted to men, I definitely can't talk about that. I can't even talk
Yeah,
about
it's like
like
that
sex with a
layer.
woman. How am I going to talk about yeah? So I just feel like
Yeah.
in general, like our our generation, not everyone certainly. I'm sure many people did have awesome relationships with their parents and talking about matters of sex and sexuality, but I know just for me personally, that kind of was what comes to mind is that it was just always so awkward and shrouded in secrecy and shame, and then you add on a homosexual orientation to that, and it just
Yeah.
wasn't. I wasn't like primed for success in that department. I've had to learn a lot of things, I would say, in my adult years.
Yeah. It's interesting because my parents are Gen X and I'm Gen Z. So, and this is just like about their relationship. They're quite open about. I guess it helps that my mom's a nurse, so she's quite open about
Mm,
that. It's still kind of like seen as just that thing that we just don't talk about. But I think there's
right.
just definitely like just a lot of shame around sexuality and sex in general. Like even just in a general sense, like talking about common things that guys go through during adolescence. A lot of men find themselves a lot of boys find themselves alone and dealing with um, emerging emotions and sexuality. And I think it's because it's just like a lack of language, but also
Mhm.
just there's just so much shame around it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that kind of is what it comes down to is like if we could just have language and just be able to talk about it, either anatomically. I love that you mentioned your mom's medical background because like even just
Yeah.
having like an anatomical like how do we name things like even that would have just been great because I had to learn a lot. I had to learn a lot of like terminology, like searching online. I mean, Google was so great to learn so much about things that I never was taught. But then obviously the layer beneath that is like, okay, now what do we do with, all of these terms and all of these words and how do we put that into practice in a healthy, particularly from a faith perspective, to cohesively to identify faith and sexuality and put them together in an integrated way that both honors the Lord, honors others, and honors yourself. Like I think, yeah, I mean, I think that is a journey, and that's part of what we're trying to do in our community is integrating all the elements of our sexuality, our
Yeah.
gender, and our faith. It's not like one separate from the other. It's integrating all of those in a holistic way.
Yeah, and it's just I think, like, if you identify a certain way, like, if you identify as gay, then people might assume like, if you say, "Oh, I'm gay and I'm a Christian," people might assume, "Well, you're in a, like, relationship." And people how someone, like, identifies is related to their experience. Like, someone might identify as same-sex attracted or gay, but I feel like even if they say that, then people automatically assume, "Okay, this person can't be integrated, they can't be a believer," and I think we just have, like, a lot of ideas about that. The way that like, for me personally, as someone with mental health issues, and, like, if I say, like, I struggle with depression or whatever, people might think that like, oh, this person isn't as like devoted or they can't integrate depression, someone struggling with depression and also having a faith journey. So I think what we really need to do is like you said, we need to integrate these parts of ourselves and just see it as just part of our story.
Yeah, and I always get a lot of feedback on people have so many hot takes on identifying language and how to identify. So I will constantly hear from more conservative people who are like, you shouldn't identify like being gay. You shouldn't, or you certainly shouldn't identify as a gay Christian because you're putting gay before the Christian, or you're like elevating your sexuality above Christ.
Yeah.
And I will always tell people like I will never elevate anything above Christ. Like that to me is my ultimate identity. So hear that first and foremost. Like I identify as a Jesus follower before I identify as anything else. But I also need to be able to name my sexuality in such a way that isn't producing shame, isn't producing denial of something that isn't there, something that is there that isn't
Mhm.
there. To be able to describe it, my experience, so that other people who also have that experience can also feel like less alone and feel a sense of camaraderie and brotherhood in that. So I recognize that some people would prefer other language and other words, and I don't pretend to think that gay is 100% accurate. Like I have lots of quibbles with that
Yeah.
word. And just like honestly, I have lots of quibbles with the word Christian. Christian has become a very
But
political
yeah,
word
yeah, I think
recently,
I
like loaded with
commented
connotations. Yeah. So
yeah, I think I
every
said I
word
yeah.
everywhere's gonna have challenges and things that hit the mark and others that totally miss the mark, but doing the best I can with, trying to explain my experience as someone who follows Jesus. Like, here's me intentionally using more words. I am a man who follows Jesus, who is also attracted to other men and not at all to women, and I'm trying to put all that together, in a neat and concise way, but I recognize it can be challenging. It can be very challenging to do
Yeah.
that.
And, how would you say that navigating your journey, how would you say that coming to terms with your sexual orientation, how would you say that that influenced how you felt about your masculinity? Do you feel that that kind of, like, influenced that, or is it, like, separate?
They're definitely connected, but I do think, and everyone's gonna be different. Everyone in your other brothers community is gonna have a different answer to this too. Because I will say, I think for me, the bigger struggle to try to piece together and try to make sense of has not been my sexuality, it's been my masculinity.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of that is tied to being somewhere on the asexual spectrum. The reality is I haven't struggled sexually as much or to the degree that other men have. And so that maybe that in a sense has forced me to then focus on other things that I'm struggling with, which isn't so much sexual related, but it's masculinity related and feeling like where do I fit in? Where do I fit in with other men? Where do I fit in with other gay men? And then also where do I fit in with straight men and just the men around me at large? Because there have been I'm starting to turn the corner on this in recent years, but most of my life, for 30 something years, like that has been the constant, just obvious thought on my mind is that I do not fit in here. Like if it's at a men's group, I do not
Mhm.
fit in here. I'm the one exception, the one difference here, or at a church in general. If I'm sitting in a church, like I just feel so different. Just being single, not being married, not having kids, especially the older I get, that becomes more like obvious. And so that's been the harder battle for me is figuring out like, am I a man or like I think I am, but like where do I fit in then? Because I should be able to find other men because more often than not, I'm like the more sensitive one or I'm the more creative one or
Yeah.
I just have a different set of proclivities than most of the men, not all, but most of the men around me. So that's been a challenge of trying to figure out my own masculinity regardless of who is around me, but then also acknowledging the men around me and where can I play ball and fake it till I make it and pretend to be like them, but then also where can I be real and just be me without having to pretend to be anything that I'm not, and then trust that they'll still be there and they'll still support me and walk with me. And I'm starting to find more of that. The more I step out, I'm finding it gradually, which is encouraging.
Yeah. That's also what I struggle with is my sense of masculinity. Even though I'm straight, I'm, very sensitive. I identify myself as like a highly sensitive person.
Mhm.
So it feels weird because I'm just very in tune with the people around me and very just what people like describe me as like feminine, and it can be like, I'm over time, I've just, like, accepted it, but before, especially in high school, I would compare myself to the guys that like, other guys that I felt were more masculine than me, but that's because I associated masculinity with certain traits, whether it be physical or just certain attitudes, and after high school, I was just like, "You know what? I'm going to question what I've been told that told to accept that is masculinity, and I'm just going to find like that authenticity of masculinity. Like this is what I grew up in is one sector of masculinity, but that's not the whole thing. And I could be myself. I could, you know, I could express the God-given gifts and still be a man. It's
Mhm.
just it doesn't fit someone else's version of masculinity, and that's what I've struggled with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think but I think on the flip side, I think for a lot of people, for a lot of, like, other guys that I meet is that I, like, introduce them to, like, authenticity because they feel that they're so kind of, like, secluded in the man box that they cannot get out of, and I
Mhm.
feel like it's freedom to them. So I think for a lot of people that are sensitive or a lot of sensitive men, I think it's a blessing to be able to show other men like, "Hey, you could be this way and still be a man."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you think you said you're Gen Z. Do you think, like, you see more diversity in masculinity amongst your generation? Because 'cause I'll say from my vantage point, like, when I look up at Gen X and when I look up at the boomers, like, I see a little bit of diversity, but not really. If I'm honest, like, I don't see a lot of diversity as far as how masculinity is expressed versus when I start looking down, when I look at other millennials, and especially when I look at Gen Zers coming up, like, I think I see from my vantage point anyway, you might have a different one, but from my vantage point, I
Mhm.
see more of an openness, I think, to a masculinity that isn't as rigid as it used to be in previous
Yeah.
generations.
So here's what I'll say about that. So I do agree. I agree that Gen Z is a lot more open. We're just more challenging narratives that we've come to believe. But I would just say like we're more
Mhm.
like our sense of masculinity is more like very it's like kind of like insecure because I feel like our masculinity is like we're so worried about what other people are perceiving us to be, especially because we're kind of, we're expressing ourselves through social media. So we're so worried about our peers saying something about our identity. At the same, another thing, now that there's people are more open to different identities, whether it be gay or bisexual, people might label like what I experience like too often. People like label me as gay because of just my personality and how I express myself. So it's just there's like two sides where men are more, I would say, afraid of being authentic because they're so like hyper focused on like the social rejection or through social media.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always intrigued by stuff like this, like like different the way that different generations have an influence on the culture around them. And so, like, right now the boomers are thriving, like they're all retiring. My own parents, like my dad's retiring soon. So like I'm
Yeah.
starting to see a shift of like boomers are now starting to retire if they haven't already, and like gradually will not be in leadership anymore in the years to come. Like there'll be a shift, excuse me, there'll be a shift down to Gen Xers and millennials kind of by and large setting the table, setting the tone, and both in like policy, like legislatively with policy, but then also just in the culture and socio, like what are the standards? What are the standards for how men operate in this world? And I'm
Yeah.
hopeful that it's going to get better. Like maybe I'm
I think
idealistic,
so.
but my hope is that like as rigid ways go, like that there is more flexibility to be a man and that it's okay. You can be sensitive and you can talk about your feelings. And that's actually not feminine. I mean, it could be feminine in a binary sense, but it's like very actually amazing and courageous to talk about your feelings if you're a man or if you're a woman and to be able to have that, especially with other men too.
Yeah, I think we're kind of pushing forward where we're recognizing some, harmful narratives that kind of actually hurt men. Like for my generation, I think what I think is like gym culture is like people
Hmm.
are heavily influenced by that. They think they need to look a certain way to be a man. And that's influenced by, what they see on social media and what they see other people like at the gym trying to achieve something, but that they haven't realized that their own body can't actually achieve that. So that's kind of what I see. I don't go to the gym, and so I don't know, but I've just seen like friends that like have compared themselves to what they see on TikTok and
Hmm.
what they see with men on TikToks. I think that's a thing. I think people I think my generation, like you said, is definitely a lot more open to different expressions of masculinity and just challenging that. I think we're just so like self-conscious of doing that, but hopefully that does change. I think it will. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, TikTok is interesting, like, or any pick your thing, whether it's reels or shorts or whatever, but, like, when you start seeing, like, the gym fluencer effect of, like, there's so many men that show you what a masculine body is, and this is, like, externally what masculinity is, and maybe internally too, to another extent, and I just feel like that is, again, the internet can be such a beautiful thing when it brings you community and belonging and people who are like you, but then it can also be very shaming and isolating too. If you're
yeah.
like constantly seeing these beautiful bodies, like from my standpoint, there's an added component of attraction to it. But like even if you're not attracted to men, but you're just seeing all these men who look a certain way, and you look at your body and it doesn't look like that, like I can see
Mhm.
how that could be a very have a very negative produce a negative self-image or just be very difficult to constantly assess like am I as much of a man as this person that I'm seeing on my screen.
Yeah. I did have a question earlier, but now it's coming back to me.
Okay.
What so, like, in your experience, like, with, your other brothers, and I also asked Brian this, asked him, like, what are some myths that people have or just, like, what are some misconceptions or ideas that people have of people that identify as gay or same-sex attracted?
Some myths or misconceptions. I mean, I think the biggest one that comes to mind is like if I say I'm gay, it means that I'm attracted to all men, that all men are
Yeah.
attractive to me or something, which is not true. Cause I'm sure if someone says they're straight, that doesn't mean they're attracted to all women, right?
Right, yeah.
So so I think that's something because I think a lot of times people will be like, "Wait, you're creating a ministry for men who are all attracted to men, and you're putting them together." And we do retreats, so like now we're taking it off the internet and we're going to a place in person and we're sleeping in the same rooms with people. Like, isn't that a recipe for disaster? And it's like, yes and no. Like we have clear guidelines and we talk about all of that. We talk about all of these different things about what is appropriate behavior at a men's retreat that we do, but like the reality is just because you're a man attracted to men and the person sleeping next to you is also a man attracted to men doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're attracted to each other and that problems are going to ensue. So I think that's
Yeah.
the biggest one is that like the fact that there's more nuance to it than that. Like people want to have a
Mhm.
clear answer in their head is like, oh, you're gay. That means you're attracted to all men. You want to have sex all the time. You want to have a boy. You want to get married today.
Right.
I don't know. There's room to not fit into such a neat little box. Like life is way more nuanced than that. So I think that's the big one that comes to mind for me. And then even within our community, like there are people who definitely aren't asexual for sure. I'm the minority in that sense, but there is such a spectrum of sexuality of people who don't experience any sexual attraction to people who experience it constantly. People who are only attracted to men. We have people in our community who identify as bi, who are attracted to men and to women. So like learning that sexuality is a spectrum, it's not a binary. I think that's probably the
Yeah.
biggest misconception that people, particularly more conservative or different generations of people in the church might not understand about folks like us.
Yeah, I think maybe for them, it might just be, like it might be either lack of language or they're just might be fear of just even talking about it,
Mhm.
or it might just be, like, in their generation, it was just more, like, hidden, and they didn't feel safe to talk about it. So I think this is just, like, my, like, guess is that, like, in generations past, like, they may have, like, just suppressed it or just didn't really just address it, and maybe, like, they were what I guess I would call, like, straight passing, which maybe they were just,
Right.
like they had marriages, but they actually didn't weren't attracted to who they were married to. So I feel like back
Right.
then, because they didn't have the language and they felt, well, this is the only way to be a man in the world, or they didn't have like a sense of coming to terms with it or integrating it, like as
Right.
being a part of like just a believer. So I think it was definitely a lot harder. But yeah, I think it's like amazing that now language just help. It helps people to say like I can be a believer and still wrestle with this. I can be a believer and still identify as this. So I think it's
Yeah. And we have guys in our community, like I would say a solid 2/3 to 3/4 of our community are millennials and Gen Zers, but, like, we have a solid third of the guys in our community who are Gen Xers and especially boomers too, where it's like they tell me that all the time. They're like, they're so grateful that your other brothers exists today because where they were 40 years ago, 50 years ago, like they were just not, it wasn't even an option to like have an ability to talk about any of this. And so I'm so grateful to have an intergenerational community where we're all learning from one another. And we have guys that are
Mhm.
married to women who experience whatever level of attraction that they have for their wives. But then we also have older men who are single and following Jesus, just like we're trying to do in our 20s and 30s and 40s. It's just such a beautiful thing to see how the generations can. I was kind of hating on the boomers earlier, but like honestly, to have boomers in our community who are great, it's like really affirming to be like to have this ministry with language that they can now use to process their own lives and feel included and not excluded, is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think for me, someone that identifies as straight but also wants to be single, I think is for me, it's seen as what do I say it? Like it's just seen as I don't know, like weird or just like hmm, like, what are you doing? So I just think, like, my choice to be single, people, like, ask me about that, and I just think, it's just it's all about, like, abundance. I think people have this idea of singleness as this person is just gonna be, like, alone for the rest of their life, but it's just more of abundance, and seeing that, like, a romantic relationship can be fulfilling to other people, but, like, doesn't mean, like, everybody wants to be in a relationship. And I think we need to
Right.
ask, like, is what we've learned in culture about that, is it biblical or is it just has been reinforced by the culture?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I would say I would echo the words of Paul, which is like if you can stay single, stay single. Like there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that. That's a great calling. And if you find love and get married to a woman one day, awesome, great. But to denigrate singles, like that's just like I think the church is slowly coming around to that. My own church personally is great about that. But like I know that that's a harder turn for other churches in other parts of the country to make where it's like, wait, you can be single regardless if you're straight or not. Like you can just be single and fulfilled and do good work
right.
and love the people around you and love them with greater capacity probably than if you're a married person with 7 children. Like I don't know, it's like interesting to see how that's still being received today. But I would say good on you for pursuing singleness and living faithfully as a single person.
Yeah, and I think we just need to like maybe challenge our idea of what community and what family could be. I joke with my friends, like I'm super close with my friends. Friendship is like you'll see on my podcast, like friendship is like a huge
Mhm.
thing for me. Like they're like I joke with them like you're like my family. So it's just I think people and hopefully like millennials and like Gen Z, we might be kind of shifting the narrative of what like an ideal family is and how we deem family. It's not like the get married and have 2 kids like it was like in the 1950s, but it's just
Mhm.
different. It's different. It's like having a sense of authentic community. Like you might be so like close with your biological family, but you also have like a community that is just so home to you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get excited thinking about like, I'm such a rebel at heart. Like, how can I be a revolutionary or how can I help like
Yeah,
other rebels and revolutionaries like think about things in a different way? Cause like I'm already seeing it in our community and I'm expecting it to continue in the decades to come. Like so many of our community members have like moved in together and there's like a house of 4 guys or 3 guys or 5 guys. And even I've done it for stints of my life where I've lived with like 3 guys at a time or 5 guys at a time. And like, that's not typical. It's not like quote unquote normal, but
the American way.
it's amazing. Yeah, it's not like the way of like getting married and having the kids when you're in your 20s or whatever. Like I expect that that will continue for our community and hopefully for people outside of our community too. Like it's okay to like live with people who aren't your spouses and to do community living in a very intentional, specific way that doesn't look like a marriage with 2.5 kids, but it can still be really a beautiful thing nonetheless. So I'm excited to
Right.
see what that looks like.
Right, because I think in history, if you look back in history, it's actually like that the idea of like the family of, get married and have 2 kids, I think it's just very recent, at least from what I've researched, it's just very recent and people had different ways of living in history.
Yeah.
You look at like Jesus and his disciples, like that's people would probably like today because he lived with them, he did community with them. So people will probably look at that as just like get a wife and kids, like, but it's just you have to. I think it's all about yeah, like being revolutionary and just challenging. I like challenging things like a little bit too much, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel you. Sometimes I need to ramp it down, but sometimes it's worth
Yeah.
ramping up for to be like, no, this let's challenge this norm because it doesn't have to always be this way for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we're almost like at time, so but I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah, so great.
Yeah, I definitely I learned like so much, and also before we end it, I do have another question.
Okay.
So I've experienced this like maybe once or twice where I've had a friend come out to me, but I wasn't always safe. I wasn't always like, I didn't
Mhm.
know how to hold that vulnerability. So my question is like, how can like straight men, how can they hold that vulnerability when someone comes out to them in a safe way?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes for anything, but particularly with sexuality, it's like to be able to just like when someone says something to you that you're either not expecting or maybe you're fully expecting it or anywhere in between, to be able to like still make eye contact with them, like you're not
Hmm.
looking away in embarrassment or shame, but like you're essentially like I remember someone describing it to me once, a counselor. It's like pretend like they said the most like surprising, craziest thing you'd ever heard, but like your goal is to keep a straight face and listen and just be like, okay, what are they saying? Let me get more information and let me just be present with them, regardless of what's coming out of their mouth. So that can pertain to coming out, that can pertain to having an addiction with alcohol or whatever the
Hmm.
confession is, to be able to like still maintain eye contact and not turn away and be able to receive what they're saying and to learn more. I mean, we're all, I think as humans, we're all quick to judgment and we're all quick to connect the dots and be like, okay, if they said this, that means this and that means this. And my beliefs say this. So that means they're not this or they are that. And
Right.
I think if we can all learn a measure of, and I'm speaking to myself, I'm not like being holier than thou, but like if I can just learn
Yeah.
to sit with people, get more information, learn the context, learn their story, learn what's brought them to this moment in time, and like not be turned off and not turn away. I think it's just I think we overcomplicate it, honestly. Like how can we just
Yeah.
listen to someone's heart and just receive them and say, thank you so much. I think to be able to thank somebody for their courage, like because they've probably been thinking about this conversation for a long time, more than likely. Maybe it happened spontaneously, but probably they've been thinking about it
Yeah.
with regard to the coming out conversation. They've probably thought about it for a long time and have played it over in their head multiple times. Like, how would you respond? And I think that's such a beautiful thing when they reach a point where they trust you. They trust you to share that part of themselves with you and like to just honor that and be like, thank you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for sharing that, for trusting me with that information. I'd love to learn more. Like maybe they explained a lot of it. Maybe you still have a lot of questions, but I think to be able to like extend the invitation to have a follow-up conversation so it's not just like a bomb was dropped and then it's
Yeah.
never
It's just a
never discussed
surprise.
again, because we've had that happen. I've had that happen in my life where it's like I kind of wanted a follow up, but I didn't verbalize the desire for a follow up, but then it wasn't asked for either. And so
I
I think
didn't
if you were to
either.
take the initiative and be like, I would love to talk more if you're up to sharing more how's next week or next month or whatever, like having a follow up, I think is helpful to like remove the layer of shame that can settle in afterward for the person that's sharing that. So I always recommend that to people. Like don't let the bomb go off and then pretend like it didn't happen. Like I think there should be a follow-up, but also something that's comfortable for the other person because they may not want to follow up. They might want to just say it all and never speak about it again. Like you have to assess that for your relationships. But
Yeah.
I know for me, I want the follow-up if I'm just sharing that with somebody. I don't wanna just because it is such an it's
Yeah.
for me, I'm a special case in the sense that this is my ministry and this is my living, and I'm constantly talking about this stuff, but I'm sure there are other people that it's not as relevant or not as something that they wanna constantly be talking about, certainly to the degree
Yeah.
that I do, but everyone's different. I think having some clarity at the end of such a conversation is always good, though.
Yeah. I think, and you mentioned a few important points for men, especially when it comes to friendship, is that we always feel like we need to fix whatever they like reveal, whatever like our friends tell us. But really, we just it's really all about presence and listening and just curiosity. And I think that's what
Right.
like a lot of friendships can sometimes miss because men might be so we jump to like fixing or jump to like projecting our idea of like their struggle, but really it's just they just want to be heard.
Yeah. Curiosity is a good one. Yeah. If we can all just learn to be more curious with our friends or strangers too, for that matter, but especially our friends and our loved ones, like I think we would see a world of difference in our lives. So curious is a good word to use there.
Yeah, well, there's your advice for the listeners. Again, I just want to thank you for being on the podcast. It was really eye-opening, and I will definitely just use this just for just opening my mind and opening other people's minds of what, being a believer is with coming to terms with your sexuality.
It was a great conversation. I really,
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. Thanks for leading it. I can tell you're gonna be a good therapist because you have a good you're a good listener. You have a nice presence about you. So it was lovely to meet you, Micah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.